Bill wrote an article about the 11th step, which was published in the Grapevine in 1958. And what he has to say here is quite consistent with my own experience. He says this: 12-stepping, talking at meetings, recitals of drinking histories, confessions of our defects and what progress we have made with them, no longer provide us with the released and abundant life. Our lack of growth is often revealed by an unexpected calamity or a big emotional upset. Perhaps we hit the financial jackpot and are surprised that this solves almost nothing, that we are still bored and miserable notwithstanding. As we usually don't get drunk on these occasions, our bright-eyed friends tell us how well we are doing. But inside, we know better. We know we aren't doing well enough. We still can't handle life as life is. There must be a serious flaw somewhere in our spiritual practice and development. What then is it? The chances are better than even that we shall locate our trouble in our misunderstanding or neglect of AA Step 11, prayer and meditation and the guidance of God. The other steps can keep most of us sober and somehow functioning, but Step 11 can keep us growing if we try hard and work at it continually. If we expend even 5% of the time on Step 11 that we habitually lavish on Step 12, the results can be wonderfully far-reaching. That's an almost uniform experience of those who constantly practice Step 11. And I can tell you that when people come to me and ask for help, people with long-term sobriety, one of the first questions I ask them is, are you working your 11th step? And almost invariably the answer is no. I learned how to do it, I played around with it for a while, and I don't do it anymore. I don't take an inventory at night. I pray once in a while if the mood strikes me, and I seldom meditate. Also, of course, my meetings have fallen off, and I haven't had a sponsee for the last 6 months. And when you see that, you see a person who is walking around with untreated alcoholism. Because this disease never rests, and it is always waiting. Those terrible 4 horsemen are out there doing drag races up and down the parking lot. And the one thing that stands between us and the booze and eventual death is that we have a loving God firmly between us and the booze. In order for that to happen, we have to stay spiritually fit. In order for that to happen, it's necessary for us to spend time each day improving and perfecting our spiritual life and our spiritual fitness. When we went through the page 85, we saw that so clearly, that we have a daily reprieve, and that's all we have. And that every day is a day when we must carry a vision of God's will for us into everything we do. It's important for us to remember where we came from and how we got here and what is expected of us. Open your books up to page 63, please. Always, always we have to go back to basics. Because when we do that, then we find out what's going on with us as we reach different plateaus, or as we begin to fall away. We need to remind ourselves what the basic facts are. We're working with a spiritual program of action which demands certain things of us. There are many, many, many musts in the 12-step program. And every must means or else. Let's look at the top of page 63. Now notice that we have already done our third step. Over on page 62, we found that we had to quit playing God, that it didn't work. And then we decided, that's the decision of the third step, to let God be the director, the principal, and the father. Right after that, we have this paragraph which really looks to the future, and it tells us where we're going, what's going to happen when we get there, and what we need to do. Second line on top of page 63, we had a new employer. Being all-powerful, he provided what we needed. In other words, God will give us everything we need, and including, of course, whatever it takes for us to stay sober. He provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Now, that keeping close to him is one half of what we are going to do every day, and performing his work well is the other half. That is, in terms of what we do for our program. Let's go over to page 85 now, please. Let's see where we've come to. We've been restored to sanity. We've entered the world of the Spirit. We have been instructed here that every day is a day when we must carry a vision of God's will for us into everything we do. Remember now, that's consistent with our 12th step, isn't it? That we're to practice these principles in all of our affairs. And the last full paragraph teaches us that we must, if we've carefully followed directions, we have now begun to sense the flow of God's Spirit into us. And we have become God-conscious, and we developed a vital sixth sense, which means that now we have the ability to be inspired, to intuitively know what it is that God wants of us, provided we're willing to seek that knowledge. Now the 11th step tells us what? That we are going to seek through prayer and meditation to do what? To improve our conscious contact with God. You see, here on page 85, following the 10th step, we find that we have achieved conscious contact, that we've become God-conscious, that we've sensed the flow of His Spirit into us, that we have entered the world of the Spirit. Now the 11th step says we must seek to, through prayer and meditation, to improve this conscious contact that we have been granted, that we have achieved through the steps. And we're to pray only for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out. So when you put all these pieces together, it becomes obvious that the whole point is that now we have gotten close to God, and now we must stay close to God. That's what it told us clear back on page 63. If we stay close to Him, and then in the 12th step it tells us to perform His work well. So you see both sides of that equation are right here in the 10th, 11th, and 12th steps. And so when we take the 11th step and brush it off, or decide that that's too much fiddling around, we've already got it made, our bright-eyed friends tell us you don't need to make some kind of an obsession out of AA. Just get to a meeting once in a while. That's all you need to do now. And we believe that. We cease being disciplined. We cease being consistent in doing our work. And at that point, everything starts to go right back downhill again. To stay close to God means that each day we progress spiritually. To progress spiritually means that we're going to take inventory. It means that we're going to pray. It means that we're going to meditate. And it means that we're going to be turning our thoughts resolutely to someone else that we can help. Because a big part of spiritual growth obviously comes about as a result of the work we do with others. Remember what Bill said all the way back in his story. that if an alcoholic failed to enlarge and perfect his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he couldn't survive the certain low spots ahead. And he'd drink again. So when we add all this up, when we look at the 11th step, we're looking at something which is, to say that it's vital, that it's crucial, is almost an understatement. It's life and death. This is the mother's milk of recovery, the 11th step. It is through the 11th step that we're able to always know what our present circumstances are. And we must know what our present circumstances are in order to deal with them. Nothing will get ahead of us. Those who work their 11th step every day never have to do another 4th or 5th step. Why would you need to? You never anything ever gets ahead of you. We're not going to expect that our lives have somehow become a self-cleaning oven. They're not. Every bit of the cleaning is done by us. And it's through that effort that we stay on a spiritual path, growing spiritually. It may sound, if you're new, like some kind of a crazy idea that we're going to devote our lives to this, that we're somehow becoming semi-clergy or something. That's not true. But we do have to spend a certain amount of time each day on a disciplined, consistent basis taking care of our spiritual side. You know, it is, in the treatment centers, they like to teach us that we are feelings. Our feelings. We're not. We are spirit. The feelings are just there. They're consequences of what's going on in our lives. But we are spirit. And what we need is spirit food. And that's what we have to have. The spiritual awakening of the spirit within us, is so critical to us, because it is only through that we get to truly know what and who we are. We are not a complex of our experiences. We are not a complex of our genetic heritage. We are not the product of our environment, only on the surface, only in terms of symptoms. But our real self is spirit. God is spirit, we are spirit, He is of us, and we are of Him. Our job is to stay there. Our job is to stay in close personal contact with the higher power of our own choosing, our own experience. God as we have experienced Him in our own program. But we must do that. Because otherwise what happens is that we lose our spiritual edge. Alcohol is a subtle foe. We're not cured of alcoholism. We've been granted a reprieve, or call it remission. So many of us are like the heart patient who has gone in to see the doctor, and the doctor has examined him and said, boy, you've got a problem here, we're going to have to do a triple bypass. They go in, they do the triple bypass, and it's successful, and the guy comes back to talk to the doctor after getting out of the hospital. The doctor said, okay, here are the things you got to do. From now on, if you do these, you can probably live the rest of a normal life. And the guy goes ahead and does it for a little while. Then he gets tired of it. Then one day, the elevator is broken, so he walks up the stairs and nothing happens. Then somebody offers him a couple of drinks and nothing happens. And on and on. And pretty soon, everything that he was told he ought not to do, he's doing. Everything he was told he ought to do, he isn't doing. And then he can't understand it, and his family is horrified when he has another heart attack and it kills him. And this is exactly the same thing that's going on with us. Because the truth is that we have a fatal, incurable disease in remission right here at the 11th step. Now, if we care, if we want to keep it that way, then we're going to take the 11th step very seriously, because it is the way that we use to stay close to God. That's the requirement for us to expect God to fulfill His promise to stay close to it, to to give us everything we need. Not necessarily what we want, but certainly what we need. It will always be there. So we get down to the bottom of page 85 then. And remember that we have already learned how to take inventory during the day. That's step 10. It was really amazing to me. I heard a woman share her story. And she'd been around over 30 years. And she kept talking about doing step 10 at night. And I kept thinking to myself, you're a terrific lady and she got a great message, but when's the last time you read the big book? Step 10 is done during the day. It has a very specific purpose, as we discussed a couple weeks ago. Step 11 has an inventory, but it's not the 10th step. It's the 11th step, and has an entirely different purpose, as we're going to see. Bottom of page 85. Step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. It works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. It's interesting that the word attitude pops up here, guys, because when you get to the 11th step, you start taking a PhD in recovery. And one of the major things that we learn is that our attitudes and our motivations become critical. Now we get over into the chapter 7, and we're looking at the 12th step. We're going to see just how critically important motivation is. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? If we have the proper attitude and work at it, prayer works. Remember back in the 4th step where we found out, and when we meditate, the big book told us if we get jammed up on some sex issue or relationship problem, it said in morning meditation, ask them what you should do about each specific problem. And then there's a little tagline there. It says, the right answer will come if you want it, which presupposes that we are not trying to instruct God as to what the answer ought to be. We haven't predetermined what we want of Him. We're truly willing to accept whatever the answer may be, even if it means get out of her life, or He's not for you. That's not what we want. We want God to put His great big stamp of approval on what we want. But when we truly are willing to accept whatever it is that God wants of us, then we're really a long way toward being home. Dr. Paul kind of gave us the clue on that. Remember his story? It used to be called Dr. Addict Alcoholic. Now they call it something else about, I don't know, something about expectations or something like that. But anyway, it's the same story. You remember at the end of his story, he said, I never just sit around waiting for God to show me what He wants me to do. Rather, he said, I do what's in front of me to be done. And I leave the results up to Him. And then, however it turns out, that's His will for me. And what a great attitude to have. God, just, whatever it is you want, I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do here. And I know that however it turns out, it'll be the way you want it. So it works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. It'd be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. I want to remember here what we're reading. This big book is history. It's not philosophy. It's not something somebody made up. It's not some theory, and it's not some opinion. What we're reading is history. This is what the people who wrote the big book did. And this is why they recovered. And they want us to know that they believe that if we do what they did, we too can recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. That's the whole point of this book. That's why they wrote it. So we've done this, it's worked for us. We believe it'll work for you too. So as we read this, we remember that this is what they're telling us that they did. Now then, when it comes to a written inventory, there can be all kinds of variations on the theme. However, if you look at this thing, you begin to realize, this first paragraph on 86, just how inspired it really is, because it comes at the question of inventory in an entirely different way. To see what that entirely different way is, we have to hark back now to page 70. I'm going to show you where this comes from, and what we're really doing here with this inventory. Page 70, first full paragraph. Suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Now what are we talking about here? Isn't it, suppose we get off the path? Suppose we stray from the path? What is our path? To practice these principles in all of our affairs. The big book says that the spiritual life is not a theory, we have to live it. Suppose we fall short of that. Does this mean we're going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, but this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and on our motives. Motives again. We can do the right thing for the wrong motives. It'll block us just as surely as doing the wrong thing. If we're sorry for what we've done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and will have learned our lesson. If we're not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we're quite sure to drink. We're not theorizing. These are facts out of our experience. So you see, that's what we're looking for here. We're looking to see if during the day we did what was in front of us to be done, that we did the next right thing when it presented itself, that we left the results up to God, that we tried to put back into life instead of taking from life, that we in fact worked our 10th step, that when the defects of character cropped up, we did something about them. We're being asked questions here which are retrospective. We're looking back to the day to see, did I today do what I was supposed to do? Did I do my 10th step? Did I inventory my defects when they cropped up? Did I talk to somebody about them? Did I ask God to remove them? Did I make amends quickly if I harmed someone? Did I turn my thoughts resolutely to someone I could help? And so the first 6 questions in this little inventory at night go right back to our performance during the day. Did we get off the path today? And the rest of the questions are designed for us to see just how far off the path we may be. But it's more importantly, it is showing us what we have done that we shouldn't have done, and it's giving us the opportunity to make up our minds that we want to do better, just what we learned back on page 70. As a matter of fact, this is the only place in the whole big book where we are specifically instructed to ask for forgiveness. And the forgiveness is there because as we do this inventory, we learn where we have strayed from the path, from the chosen ideal. We have become sincerely sorry for that, and we're asking God to take us on to better things, to show us how to do better. It is under those circumstances that we set aside the otherwise devastating results of that kind of action. We're not going to drink, and we will be forgiven. Now that's what this inventory is all about. It is not duplicative of the 10th step. It hasn't anything to do with the 10th step except to look at the 10th step and see if we in fact did what we were supposed to do during the day. And of course if we did not, now we have a chance to correct that. Now there are 10 questions here to be answered every night. Old-timers will always, almost always, tell you, let's write it down. We always taught, keep a journal. I've been keeping a journal since my 47th day of sobriety. Every day. a complete history of my sobriety. It's of little interest to anybody but me, but it's very interesting to me. Every once in a while I get a chance to go back and look back 10, 12, 15 years and see what's going on then. We're going to keep a journal and we're going to answer these questions in writing. Why would we not? Didn't we learn in the 4th step and again in the 10th step that we don't take inventory in our heads? 9 times out of 10 it ain't going to work. We get sidetracked. Something comes up, we start playing with it and massaging it, and before we know it, we're clear off the track. But when we write it down, we get it out of our heads and get it down on paper, and that's where we can deal with it. That's when we can really see our present reality and what we need to do about it. So it is very highly recommended by yours truly and by many, and all of the antecedents in my chain of command. We've always taught, write it down, keep a journal. As a matter of fact, I like to start people off keeping a journal as soon as they've read the big book. We start maybe just writing down what happened during the day, but start writing. When I do my writing at night, I put down my day of sobriety up in the left-hand corner and today's date in the right-hand corner. And so I always know what day of sobriety I'm working on, which is only for my own information. Once in a while somebody will ask me, and I got to remember, what did I write down last night? The date, and then I write down the answer to these questions, and then I write down what happened during the day, just a brief description. It's kind of like a little diary thing. And now I wouldn't be without, for years and years and years I wouldn't be without it. When I travel, I have a traveling journal. It always goes with me. And I teach the people I sponsor to do this. And once we get used to doing a written inventory at night, I'll tell you, you miss a couple of days and you start to feel it. Really feel it. Because there's something that starts crowding in our heads that we didn't get out. We didn't take care of business. Now then, you remember when we first started our study of the 4th step, that we discovered that the 4th step is directed toward 4 defects of character. There's nothing in the big book about sin, deadly or otherwise. That's a figment of the 12 and 12. It's got nothing to do with the big book. The 4 defects of character which are identified and pinpointed in the 4th step are resentment, dishonesty, selfishness, and fear. And so, for want of a better way to characterize them, I call them the cardinal defects. And then when we got to the 10th step, remember what we found? There they were again. Same defects. Resentment, dishonesty, selfishness, and fear. And so now when we get to the 11th step, we would expect the big book to again be consistent, which it always is. And we wouldn't be surprised to find that it again is consistent. So what are we looking for? On page 86, when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. We're looking back on the day. This is a review of what we did today. Did we or did we not stay on the path today? Were we, during the day, resentful? That's question number 1. Second question, were we selfish during the day? Third question, were we dishonest today? Fourth question, were we afraid? So we have resentment, selfishness, dishonesty, and fear. And we're looking back to see if these cropped up during the day. Because the next question is, do we owe an apology? And so you see what's happened here is that we have a duplication of our four-step inquiry, what defects came up. The fifth question is, do we owe an apology, which is a ninth step inquiry. But of course it goes right back to the 10th step. In the 10th step we are told to make amends quickly if we've harmed anyone. Now tonight when we look back on our day, we say, did I do that? Did I harm someone, and did I in fact make amends quickly? Or to the contrary, do I owe an apology? So again, we're double checking ourselves, see what we did today. Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? That's our fifth step, isn't it? We inventory in the fourth step, we admit to another person in the fifth step, we make amends in the ninth step. And here in the 11th step inventory, we're looking back during the day to see whether or not we in fact took care of business. I had a resentment crop up. Did I talk to somebody about it? In the 10th step, it tells me I'm to do that. I'm to inventory it, I'm to talk to somebody about it, and I'm to ask God to remove it. 4th step, 5th step, 7th step. If I've harmed anybody, I'm to make amends quickly. 9th step. I'm then to turn my thoughts resolutely to somebody I can help. 12th step. I'm looking back now to see if I did that. Now, if I owe an apology or if I kept something to myself that should have been discussed with another person at once, I have the opportunity now, perhaps, to correct that. Yes.
This matter of have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once?
Yes.
Is this just a matter of you making an apology or an amends to that person, or is it like you said? It's like the fifth step. The fifth step. Let's say it's not something that maybe I was selfish or dishonest or resentful. In my fifth step, I would reveal that to a sponsor. I tell that to somebody, and that's part of the healing. That's part of the healing process. Maybe from there I got to go to God. Is this thought of have I kept something to ourselves? Is it of that nature, where something I've done wrong, something beyond just an apology? Is it just talking about I'm apologizing? Because it seems like apology is the line before it. So it would seem.
You know something, David? I've been doing this a long, long time, but I keep telling everybody every time I do it, I learn something new. I never thought of that.
Well, it would seem like you would be talking to your sponsor or confidant a lot, almost every day, unless you were...
I've always assumed that was referring to the defects, but I know now that your question implies an answer which is different, and I'm convinced that you're probably on the right track. Whatever it is that's come up that should have been discussed. Any fifth step matter, it doesn't have to be the defect. It could very clearly be something we did to harm somebody else.
Well, that's an amends kind of thing.
Yep, but we need to talk, we have to admit it first, don't we?
Right.
That's what we do in our fifth step before we get to 8 and 9. Now that's an excellent point.
So there would be then almost a daily contact with a sponsor or a confidant or somebody.
Sure.
Okay.
But then, you see, it doesn't have to be somebody that we formally have identified as a sponsor, although often it may be.
Okay.
We would hope that all of us have people in our circle of close friends in AA that we trust, that we're able to discuss matters with. And I know I certainly have. There are people that I have no qualms about going to with anything in my life. But that's an excellent point. Something has come up during the day which we should have discussed with another person. In other words, done a fifth step on, as David points out. We got to see here whether that happened, and we better take care of it if we can. Maybe better pick up the phone and call somebody, our sponsor or someone, tell them about it. These things are like, they're termites. They get in us and they eat us alive, if we don't take care of them.
Jim, could that be the form of an apology, though? Like you said before, that says, do we owe an apology to the previous question? Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? Like, in other words, if I screwed you, and I recognize that maybe I got to discuss it, would let you know that I did you wrong or something like that.
Yeah,
that's so obvious.
That's another good point. There could be crossover here.
Between the ninth step there, maybe I got to make an amendment. I got to talk to you about this. Maybe
You're absolutely.
Do you damage or something?
You're absolutely right.
I gotta go after the ninth step in that, and that means discuss it with another person, could be you, the person I harm.
Well, now, I'm glad you guys are bringing these up because you can see the depth of this 11-step inventory. This is not some little mechanical thing like we do during the day just to try to stay clear of the stuff that would ruin our day. This is really going down to where we live. This is a question of how clean is our spirit today? How well are we staying on a spiritual path? And so however you wish to interpret these and apply them, whatever has come up in your life today that needs that threatens to interfere with our spiritual fitness, we have to take care of it. And so both of your suggestions are excellent, and I'm going to put them into my memory bank too, because I need to point that out the next time this comes up. Okay, the next question is, today was I kind and loving toward all? Well, now that goes directly to what we learned back on page 84 again. Notice down at the bottom of that last full paragraph, 5 lines up from the bottom of the page. Love and tolerance of others is our code. Now, this question on page 86 identifies what that means. It does not mean that we carry around an attitude of love or an attitude of tolerance. This question asks us today, was I kind and loving toward all? In other words, did I act with kindness and love? Because love which is not acted upon is like faith without works. It's dead. There's no love there unless it has to be expressed in some way. It has to be put into action. Same way with tolerance. It's not enough to say that in my secret heart of hearts I'm very tolerant of you. But that I act with tolerance. Because the act of tolerance is the act which solidifies the actual fact of tolerance. I'm not tolerant just thinking about it. I'm only tolerant if I act with tolerance. And so here, in this little nightly inventory, I'm asking myself today, did I act toward others with love? Was I kind toward others today? There's I don't know if I passed this on to you guys, but it's what I call being slick. And that may sound like something kind of slippery and stuff, but it's not. It's a way of remembering something for me, and I'll pass it on to you. I believe that our job each day is to be soft-spoken, loving, considerate, and kind. And you can put an I in there if you want. I don't know what it would be. Slick. Soft-spoken, loving, considerate, and kind. And when we do that, when we act toward other people that way, we have a tremendous impact upon our environment. We have a tremendous impact upon our milieu, the place where we live, the place where we work, and our families and our friends and our social gatherings. The person who is soft-spoken, loving, considerate, and kind will trigger the same kind of reaction in the people around them. I can tell you that, this is something some of you will be able to identify with. It's been a hard day at the office or at the hospital, and you're tired and you're kind of grouchy, and now you got to go home. And when you get home, the wife or the husband who's waiting here is going to be grouchy too, probably yell at you for a couple things. And the kids are going to scream and yell, and the dog's going to bite you, and the parrot's going to swear at you. And it's going to be altogether the terrible end to a rotten day. You know, it's a funny thing, if you make up your mind when you go home, you're going to walk in the door, soft-spoken, loving, considerate, and kind, changes the whole place. Changes everything. Which teaches us a great lesson. We really do have a hell of a lot to say about our own environment. because our problems, we have now found out, are of our own making, that they arise out of ourselves. There were extreme examples of self-will run riot. Now we've been making decisions based on self all this time. Now we're going to change all of that. And this is asking us, today was I loving and kind toward all? Not those selected few favored ones who deserve it, but toward all. We have been making these kinds of decisions and rationalizations. We've been separating people out and putting them in categories all our lives, and we're going to stop that now. If we make it our business to be kind and loving toward all, it's amazing what happens. Yes?
It looks like to me this paragraph, at night we review all of these questions in our mind.
No, we write them down. The answers.
During the day, as they come
No, at night.
up.
That's the whole point of what we're talking about here. There are two separate inventories during each day. One is the 10th step that we do during the day. The other's 11 steps that we do at night. They have totally separate purposes. The one during the day is to take care of the stuff as it crops up. The one at night is to look back on the day and see if we did that. How did we live our lives today? Did we get off the path today? Because it is leading us irrevocably to the place where we're going to be asking for forgiveness. And we're going to be asking God to take us on to better things. And we have to know what that is. That's why we do this. We don't take inventory in our heads. We take it on paper. We write it down. Get it out of your head, get down on paper, now you can deal with it. Remember that little ditty that I came up with? The more you write, the better you feel. The more you write, the better you feel. Well, you can see how that could go on, and it does. People who write the stuff down will always tell you the same thing. This is what really works. Write it down. Get it out of your head. See, you got all this stuff in collision in your head right now. And there's no resolution there. And there's too many things there, and there are always a few that we pick out to massage and play with. We're always going to try to dance with the clown. But when we write it down, it gets down on paper. And now Donna can look at that and say, wow, this I got to fix, this I got to fix. Let's see how I do this. And here is something that needs to be taken care of right now. Whereas our minds will blank stuff out. We'll rationalize stuff. We'll deny it. We'll push it aside. And we've been doing that all our life. We can't afford to do that anymore. Why? Very simple. These things that we've been ignoring have blocked us off from God. Go back to basics. You cannot afford to be blocked off from God. Not if you wish to live. We have to get rid of the things that block us, and then we have to stay free of those things. And that's what we're doing right here. Because your life depends upon it. The only way that we ever stay sober is we get in God's pocket and we stay there. And that's up to us, not up to Him. It's up to us. It all depends upon the work that we're willing to do to stay in God's pocket. Okay? Now then, let's go on here. Oh, this is a great question. What could I have done better? During the day, looking back on my day, what could I have done better? And we already ran into stuff like that when we did our 4-step, remember? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? These are the same kinds of questions. Now here we find, what could I have done better? This question requires of us to give it some thought, and be a little bit creative, and be dead honest about it. And we write out the answer to that question, because we're looking for two things here. First of all, we certainly are looking to change our lives, but we are also looking to go to God with this and ask Him for help with it. That's the point. When I ask God to forgive me, I'm at the same time asking Him to show me how I can do better. And I'm saying, God, these are the things I did that I should have changed or I shouldn't have done. Please show me how to do better tomorrow. That's the key to forgiveness for us. We learned that back in the 4th step. What could I have done better? Was I thinking of myself most of the time? Well, if you remember now, everywhere through the big book, everywhere, we find the same theme over and over and over again. Selfishness, selfishness, self-centeredness, self-pity. Was it selfish or not? Decisions based on self. It's because Bill knew that this was the most damaging thing that we do, is to stay buried in self, because that blocks us off from God. We cannot have God in our lives and self ruling our lives at the same time. Go back to the 3rd step. What did we decide? Did we mean it or not? Did we in fact decide that hereafter God was going to be the director, He was to be the principal, we the agent, He to be the father, we the child? Did we mean it when we said our 3rd step prayer? I offer myself to Thee, to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. I am here, take me. No reservations. Did we mean it? And if we did, then we know how critically important it is to stay out of self. And here's the key question, because it is our thinking about ourselves which is the major indicia of being buried in self, isn't it? Was I thinking of myself most of the day? And if I have to say yes to that, then I know I got a problem. I know that today I was living buried in self. And yet, this is the most natural of human conditions, isn't it? Because we human beings are just naturally self-centered. It's the way we're built. Therefore, we've got things that we need to do every day to stay out of self. There are 3 things that we do that the Big Book has shown us to do. 1, as we go through the day, we turn often to God and we say, God, what do you want me to do next? What's my next step to be? Thy will, not mine, be done. This is a conscious effort, an action on our part, which is an action of surrender, isn't it? And if we do that during the day, we're constantly reminding ourselves who's running the show. Second thing that we do that is an act of surrender, to stay out of self, is we meditate. In meditation, as we're going to talk about this next week, and we'll probably do some meditating together as well, because a lot of people have a little fear of it. When we meditate as a group, we find out very quickly that we can do it. But meditation is an act of surrender. God is there, and we're letting go to Him. We are agreeing with God that whatever it is He wants us to do, we're going to accept the answer. And we're asking Him to show us what He wants us to do. We are literally seeking directions from Him. And the other thing we do to stay out of self is working with others. Now, there are a lot of people that stay sober for long periods of time, even though they're not doing much else, because they do an awful lot of sponsoring, or they do a lot of service work. Without the other elements of recovery, it doesn't carry them forever, but it will keep people sober for a long time. The Big Book tells us that nothing will so much insure against the next drink as intensive work with other alcoholics. And this is something that we see examples of it around us all the time.
What's the first one? Meditation, working with others.
Yeah, if you turn, I'll show you on page 84, please, or 85, page 85. If you take a look in the second paragraph, about 2/3 of the way down the page, You'll see a quote there. How can I best serve thee? Do you see that? About 6 lines up in the bottom of that paragraph. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish, the proper use of the will. In other words, they're telling us that as we go through the day, we pause and we ask God for direction, and we offer ourselves again to Him. Thy will, not mine, be done. Take a look on page 87 now. Bottom of the page. 3 lines up. As we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves we're no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, Thy will be done. You see? This is an action that we take. Now, it's really important to understand that surrender is not a state of mind. And people don't take their will back. That's a terrible misnomer around here. We don't take our will back. We just don't give it today, because we're naturally willful. There's no way that I can permanently give over my will to God today and expect a week from now it'll still be sitting there in His hands, because it doesn't work that way. That's why every day we have to do these things of surrender. And so one of the prime things that we have is this turning to Him. As Bill said in his story, and everything really goes back to Bill's story if you look carefully. He said we must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all. That's what we do. And those are the actions of surrender. Thy will, not mine, be done. Meditation, working with others, carrying the message. If we do these things, we'll stay surrendered. We'll stay out of self. Now, in this 11-step inventory, however, we're looking to see if today we slip back into self. And the only reason we did that is because we weren't doing our work. And that's why we got off the path. So now we got to be sincerely sorry for that, and we're going to ask God to show us how to do better on that tomorrow and to forgive us for getting off the path. And then the 10th question, this is a nice one. Or were we thinking of what we could do for ourselves, for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? Now, it's a lead pipe cinch. If we answer that 10th question, yes, that's what I was doing, that all the rest of the questions will be negatives. If I spent my day looking to see what I could put back into the stream of life, rather than take to give, it's almost a dead certainty that all the other stuff will be just fine. Why? Because that's what we're here for. It's our purpose. And when we do that, we find that just about everything else in our life straightens out one way or another. Not always the way we want it or expect it, but nevertheless the way it's supposed to be. All right. So now we have answered these questions in writing. And we go on here in this paragraph. But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection. And one would say, oh, well, sure, that's right, because we want to be able to sleep. We don't want to be all upset. That's not what the big book says. It says, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. You see, it's always consistent, isn't it? Everything goes back to that. And what I am doing consistent with my mission, which is to be of maximum service to God and the people about me. And anything that's not consistent with that, anything that blocks me off from that, I have to take care of it. I can't allow that to happen. And so this business of trying to go to sleep full of worry, remorse, or morbid reflection is something that would seriously hamper us in our ability to be helpful to others, and that we need to take care of. And of course, if we've got some kind of a worry on our minds, before we try to go to sleep, we need to write about it, and we need to take it to God and ask Him for help with it. And then finally, the last sentence on that paragraph, after making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. Same thing we learned back in the fourth step. Sincerely sorry for what we've done, willing to let God take us on to better things. We will be forgiven. Now, this is the only place in the whole big book where we're instructed to ask for forgiveness. And yet this paragraph is simply ignored most of the time by most people. Now, is it everybody clear that this is not the 10th step, it is the 11th step? It has an entirely different purpose and a reason for being. Is anybody who's confused about that now? I'm not trying to challenge you. I really want to know, because we need to be sure we have this cleared up.
It's just an awful lot of work.
Well, it's true, but kind of tough, huh? Yes, dear.
I hadn't thought of it till now. I don't always know what's the right thing. I mean, something's going to happen. You have to make a decision right then and there. Like yesterday, I saw an old lady, and she looked kind of shabby. She just had a small bag. And I saw her at the counter trying to return something that was not bought in that store. And then I saw that she she took a banana. And then I saw her go down the aisle, you know. And I thought, should I go and tell them to keep an eye on her? And I decided not to. I thought,
What was your thinking about not doing it?
well, the letter of the law, frankly, I'm a very honest person, would be to go and tell the people. But she was old, she looked shabby, maybe it was a scam, I don't know, but she wasn't taking much of anything. So I figured she needed it.
Well, that made it okay, huh?
No, I wouldn't do it. But it was a kind of a split-second decision, and that's just a decision I made to ignore it.
Okay.
So I thought it was the right decision for me. And and I'm not saying it outside, but it really didn't bother me until you were talking today.
So you consider that to be the right and proper thing to do?
At that time, I didn't think God was going to appear in the bananas and tell me what to do. You know, I mean, right then and there, that's what I thought was the right thing to do. It was erring on the side, I felt, of charity.
Their charity, not yours.
Well, I don't worry about my.
Well, actually, it was your charity because of shoplifting, all retail businesses have to charge us more.
Well, I'm just saying it happened fast.
It could easily cost you 2 or 3 mills over the next year.
Mm-hmm.
You know what a mill is? It's part of a penny.
It's not making me feel guilty.
Yeah.
You know? I'm sorry. I have this poor old lady that I feel needs that, whatever it is.
That's a very interesting moral dilemma. What's your answer?
No, I was just gonna ask another question, I'm sorry.
Oh, I have an answer.
Okay, we'll get to your question when we get an answer for this one.
Okay, I wouldn't have told because it's God's will, not mine, and it's not my business, and maybe that could be her bottom. Like maybe she needs to get caught shoplifting and have a consequence to learn her lesson. And if I told on her, maybe that would interrupt with God's will for her bottom.
I had a funny feeling that they knew when she tried to return this 8-ounce bottle. I felt that she was probably a regular there. I got a funny feeling that they knew, and they didn't. I don't know. They're like I.
Okay.
They're not worried about it, Mr. Winn-Dixie.
Anybody else got any thoughts on this moral dilemma? Yes.
I'd say this lady did the right thing too. Sometimes there's a higher law than what man/woman writes. And it's how you feel in your gut. And like you said, it's none of her business. And the woman was obviously hungry.
I know that.
And so that is what, I think that's the main thing. I don't believe, one banana.
No, that's the way I felt.
Raise the
It was
prices.
a big steak or something. I know there are people, but she just looked.
Furthermore,
And
I
she might
don't
have
believe
been
in
out
telling
of
on
it, I
other
don't
people
know.
anyway.
But she looked like she needed help.
If the woman would have gotten caught and they asked you to say, did you see it, that's different.
That's a different
But if
story.
you're gonna go up there and initiate things and tell on the
No,
woman,
I saw her go out without.
I think that's being moralistic.
I don't know.
Okay, who else has got
I
it?
never thought of it today.
Anybody else got a solution to this moral dilemma? Yes, Tom?
My name's Tom.